Hey, we are live. This is my first Instagram live. It's Pam here, and I am hoping somebody jumps on real briefly to see if my microphone is working. So maybe somebody will come on. If you are there, let me know if you can hear me. I am the I am actually usually used to, hey Ashley, can you hear me? Let me know if you can hear me. Okay, so I'm used to doing YouTubes and videos and all of those things. I'm actually going to have my really good friend. Okay, good, Ashley. This is my first Instagram Live, so thank you for being with me. I'm having my friend Terri on. You guys know I run consistency over intensity workout groups, and health in general and fitness is my jam. And one of the common questions that comes up, and it really was brought up not that long ago, was body dysmorphia. So one of the girls and one of the members in my group posted something very vulnerable and talked about body dysmorphia. It is something that I am kind of experienced, but I'm not an expert in it. So I thought I would bring my friend Terri on and explain some of that, and she can kind of explain what she does. She works with athletes and non-athletes and teams to build their confidence, and she is an expert in all of those things. So I am actually going to find Terri here, and she's not on. So this is my first time doing this. So hopefully she sees that and accepts it. While you guys are on, if you guys have any questions about workouts or about any body image stuff, body dysmorphia, it is a real thing. It is something that I think definitely every physique athlete goes through. And that's basically kind of just not really seeing yourself in the way that you actually look. So you feel crappy about yourself sometimes when you really shouldn't. So hopefully she sees this. I'm going to invite her on here. I don't know. I think she might have to like come on and then come back. Like I have to invite her while she's on here. I'm not really sure. So if you guys want to kind of help me along, if you guys know how to do that, I'm not sure. Let me see. You guys, I'm actually going to start over and then have her come back on. So how do you handle kids saying something that makes you feel not so great? But honestly, yeah, definitely. We'll talk about that one. There's Terri. Okay, Terri, I think I can invite you now. So here we are. Accept. Yay, I don't have to jump off. Let me see. So if you guys are just joining, I'm having Terri on. Hey, you are.
Hi.
Hey. So this is my first Instagram Live, and it's your first Instagram Live too.
This.
Yeah. Awesome. So there's a couple people on, and I kind of just explained what we were going to talk about today. Just a real quick, there was a question amongst my training groups about body dysmorphia. She's just feeling really lousy. She's making some really big changes in her health and all of that. And she was like, can you explain body dysmorphia? Can you explain kind of how to navigate through this while I'm making these changes? And I am just not feeling that well. So I wanted to bring you on because and kind of explain to everybody kind of what you do for athletes, non-athletes, but let's talk about kind of women in general, specifically body image issues maybe, and kind of how to navigate through that and kind of what you do. So I'm going to leave this to you.
Yeah. So one of the things that I do for work is I work in sports psychology. So I work on the applied side of sports psychology and athletes. I work with athletes, but also just for, the average individual, like exercisers in your group. I work as a health and wellness consultant. And yeah, body dysmorphic disorder, it's kind of crazy. It's like 90% of women, and everyone will attest to having issues at some point in their life. But about 90% of us are, having issues at some point in our life. In men as well, but more common in women. And body dysmorphic disorder, or BDD is what it's called. It's just when we have a very skewed perception of our own body, right? And it doesn't necessarily always have to be about, like the size of our hips or our thighs. Like sometimes people kind of struggle with it with other things like, bad acne or anything else that's wrong with their appearance. And it's just an unrealistic view of how we see ourselves.
Yeah. and so that's kind of the definition. And you've actually personally helped a couple of my members and that are in the group of mine. And I'm so grateful, and they're grateful. And kind of you were kind of that missing link. And Nikki's on here right now. She's somebody that
Hi, Vicky.
can attest
Yes,
to that.
I love that.
And that's really kind of helped them. So obviously I work on the consistency over intensity. We show up every day. We have the accountability. We have the community. But sometimes there's that little missing link, and that's kind of the confidence. That's where you come in. And we wanted to talk about the body dysmorphia because, you know, obviously, hey, Chris, I'm just kind of saying how I'm going to roll through these things. One of my other really good friends and neighbor, I've talked about her before with you, Terri, Ashley asked, real quick, I'm going to get to this question before it gets lost. How do you handle kids saying something that makes you feel not so great? Kind of like, you know how like if a little kid will come up to you and be like, are you pregnant? And you're like, no, I'm not pregnant. Like, you know, just little things like that. And they don't mean to be. But like, how would you navigate that? Because, you know, sometimes those things can sting.
Yeah. Well, first of all, they just, especially depending on their age, but I have 3 kids and every single one of them has said something inappropriate at some point. And it's always, you know, when they're toddlers or like young grade school, they just honestly do not have the cognitive ability to know that that's not right. And another kind of note to stem from that, it's with our kids, all of the majority of their identity, our identity, it's developed during those adolescent years. And so that's why, and I talk about this all the time too, it's so important for what we say around them as well, because we're teaching them. But they, for example, if they go to school, and this happened with my daughter actually, but if they go to school and someone like, you know, calls them fat, or they say something about their body that they shouldn't have, your child doesn't have that, again, cognitive ability, that development to be able to look in the mirror and be like, no, that was false. Like, I'm actually healthy. I look good. I'm not fat or whatever. So when their peers in their environment and people like their parents, you know, make negative comments about other people or about themselves, or, you know, hopefully never, but about their kids, that's how they're kind of forming who they are in their identity in their brain. So a little bit of their identity is formed by, you know, what they think, but a lot of it has to do with their peers and then their environment. And they become kind of, they think they are who other people say they are, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And how, I mean, like, so what would be the steps? So let's say, you know, that, and let's say, you know, they'll say, well, you know, well, you don't look that good, or they'll say something very raw, like, you know, why is your stomach large, or something like that. So how do you personally, and you've been working on yourself, and I'm kind of going into kind of the women's health and some of the girls that I help, and even myself, like, you know, how do you, what would be like the first step for your own personal self? What would you give somebody to kind of build their confidence and to work through that, of course, without being mad at the kid because they didn't mean anything by it.
I know.
It hurts your feelings, but what would somebody to help them through that process, just mentally, you know, aside from just saying like, oh, they're just little, because sometimes if you're having a bad day and you're like,
explain it. Yeah, you got to kind of sit down and explain it to them, because again, we have to, you know, everyone knows that kids are, their brains are like sponges, so whatever we tell them, they soak it up, right? But I mean, my kids have said my butt's chunky more times than I can count, and I'm like, no, it's not. Right. But you know, so with that being said, I feel like every child says something, but take it as a learning experience, right, for them, because with everything in life, we can't learn how to do things right or say things right unless we fail at that. And so that's just kind of a teaching lesson for them. But it's like, hey, let's set some ground rules. Let's set some guidelines here. It's not okay to ever say anything about anybody's body. We say that all the time in my house. Like, you don't call someone skinny, you don't call them scrawny, or you don't call them fat, you don't call them chunky. We want to, you know, build the image that our body is, you know, we have to treat it right? We have one body, we want to fuel it, we want to be strong. Like, if your kids are athletes, I always tell, you know, my kids, like with Halloween and all this stuff, with all this candy, of course they get to have Halloween candy, but I'm also like, hey, we have a tournament this weekend, you're an athlete, let's fuel your body so that you feel really strong and you feel really confident, you know, on the playing field, you know, stuff like that. But take that as like a learning opportunity to sit down. Hey, just want to let you know that I know you didn't mean anything wrong by this, but sometimes what our words say can be very hurtful to people, so be mindful what you say. It's not okay to ever comment on people's bodies, whether they're, you know, fat, skinny, whatever, quote. But more so things like, complimenting people's values and, hey, you played really well today. You're really fast. I love you. You're such a funny individual, like things like that. We just don't comment on people's bodies. So it's not a bad thing necessarily that they say that, because again, they just have to learn. And once you say that to them, once or twice, it usually works.
Yeah. Because they get it. So then you would kind of just internally say, you know what, it's okay. They didn't know anything by it. Because yeah, I mean, my kids pushed on my butt plenty of times. You have a big butt, and I'll turn around and say, you say that like it's a bad thing. Like, I work really hard for this butt.
Yeah.
And that around. So let's make sure that we address Kelsey, that was her name, in my group, her question about body dysmorphia. And can you take us through some steps? So let's say somebody came to you and that's one of their biggest struggles, was they're working really hard. Maybe they've made some strength gains and they know all of these things to say, but they just feel lousy inside. And I know you've gone through this as a professional, IFBB professional, during the years, and you and I kind of developed our friendship kind of leaning on each other over those things over the course of our athletic career. But we just kind of had to go through the depression and through the things. So that's why I think one of your passions is to kind of help athletes and help people anyway to kind of work through this. So what would be the first kind of steps for that? What would you take somebody through if they were struggling through that?
Well, first of all, I always explain that like our eating habits, they are influenced by, there's many layers involved, right? So it's beliefs about past dieting, like with competition dieting, or food culture, or family influence, like how our family influences our beliefs about eating, whether like, or, our grandparents like to bake for us all the time. They show their love that way. Our ethnicity, our own physiology. So I think that that's the first thing to kind of keep in mind, like to give ourselves a little bit of a break. Like our eating influences, our dieting quote influences, there's many, many different layers involved, and because a lot of people, the one thing I always hear people say is, I know how I should be eating, but I just don't, right? And so then they start to beat themselves up and they start to like think I can't do it, depression and all this other stuff. But it's complex, like all of those layers that I just said. So we have to kind of remember that. So there's a lot of different things that you can kind of do for body dysmorphic disorder or overcoming it. I have a little program that I do with all my clients. It's called Building Body Acceptance. But we always we talk about the cycle of, disordered eating, and then we kind of break it down. Like it's an assumption, right? And there's always a point in our life that we can think of that there's a reason why we have this assumption about ourselves. So that's one of the most important things, is to kind of look back maybe, years ago in our childhood or whatever, to kind of see what those assumptions are and like where they came from. Because once we understand that, then we can kind of, start to make progress from there. But it's a cycle, right? So like with anything else, we have these negative feedback loops that our brain forms. And I think it's very empowering for every client, every individual to know that biology can be changed by our behavior. So that's called neuroplasticity. That's our brain, right? We can literally rewire our brain by our behaviors that we do. So it's something that takes time and practice, but also kind of looking at your body in a different way. Everything is reframing. Whether when I'm doing sessions with clients, we do, confidence, we do motivation, we do visualization, we do goal setting. There's a whole bunch of different things that we do. But with everything, it takes consistency, right? And it takes on average like 30 to 60 days for an individual to create a new habit. And just like what you always talk about, you have to be consistent to do that, because then you're not going to be able to use neuroplasticity to your advantage. You can use it to your advantage or you can use it to your disadvantage. But also when we are looking at our body, I think it's so important to remember this is diet culture, right? Like who said that wearing a size 12 jeans or whatever, large shirt, whatever it is, isn't okay, right? So listing out what your values are, and I have everybody do this. We always look at character strengths. We always, go into what our own values are. But writing out our values, things like, you know, what's most important to you? Like our kids are always on there. And then, you know, creativity. I like to do art, or I just love my job. I'm very passionate about that. I love being able to help people. And then, yes, a lot of times physical appearance is on there, but then you kind of break it down and you see, okay, is like my creativity something that's my core value? Is that something that makes up me as an individual? And you're like, yeah, that does. Does you know, wanting to fit in a size 4 jean, is that a core part of who I am? No, it's not. That's diet culture, right? And then also kind of looking at your body not just as a size, and again, this is something that we work through, it's like a whole process, but just knowing that, you know, and I tell this to everyone, there's always a choice, right? With every single thing that we do, there's 2 choices that we can make. So for example, if you're choosing, you know, what sort of foods to eat for breakfast or whatever that day, you can eat like, you know, some Pop-Tarts. Maybe there's like 300 calories in that Pop-Tart. Or you can have like, you know, big omelet with some, you know, healthy toast and some ghee or whatever. And maybe there's 500 or 600 calories in that. But what option is going to fuel your body and make you that much healthier? So that's why I always say, you know, there's a choice. Just always just choose what's going to make me feel good and what's going to fuel my body and make me a healthier person overall. Because if I'm healthier, then let's look at my values. I'm better doing at all of these things. And these values are things that make up who I am as a core individual.
So basically, you would say that's why I was kind of writing some notes. So you would kind of have them break it down, and I like what you said, kind of like finding your values. So you maybe have them write a list, because I know you're big on writing, you're big on journaling. Your daily gratitude journal, you post about that, and I know I love to journal. It's a tool that I love to use as well during my own kind of healing journey, body image healing journey. So write down the values, and backtrack that real quick. Is you mentioned diet culture, and that's what I think people need to understand so much. And I'm glad you said that, because something that I think is so all over social media, and obviously that's kind of where I run a lot of my training groups, is through social media, and we stay connected. Humongous good side to it. But the bad side is that you get flooded with, like you said, this kind of diet culture sense. And you and I have been, you know, very, we understand diet culture, even though we've got sucked in and we kind of had to get ourselves on the outside. But a lot of people don't understand that word, and they don't understand that's kind of what they're comparing themselves to, is a diet culture. And that's just a really nice way of saying a really messed up mind about food and around our body image. And then you said for them to, I would say, write down your values. And that's really one take home that I think people could take from that right now, from the few minutes that we've been on, is to write down about you, but then also that are important to you. So your values about you would be, I'm a good mom, I'm this, I'm a good wife or a good friend or what have you.
Yeah, like I'm honest, I'm creative. There's something that I always have, again, everyone do at some point while we're working together. It's called a character strength survey, and there's lots of little surveys like that, but they're pretty cool. So I always, you know, have them do the character strength survey, and then we talk about, you know, their top 5 strengths, and then, you know, the top 5 weaknesses or whatever, but always like operating from those 5 top strengths, because when we do that, we just become more confident. And I did say something about before, like assumptions. So like the first step is like always like thinking about, where did this assumption come from? Because again, it's a perception of us. It's not true. And everything that all of these, there's something called ANTS, ANTS. It's automatic negative thoughts, and it's like which is exactly what it sounds like. It's just these thoughts come into our head, like, you know, like right before you walk out on stage for a competition or something, you're like, oh my gosh, like my bikini bite's not sitting right. I'm going to trip on stage. I'm going to look like a fool. I don't look as fit as like these other people, or whatever it is, right? So they're just like,
or whatever. Yeah. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not whatever.
Anything. Yeah. Anything. So, but the thing is that we have, and I can get into like the different sides of your brain and stuff and why that comes in, but because for me personally and for other people, it really helps when you know why these things are happening and you know how to change them and you can debunk them. Because with everything, it's about reframing our our negative thoughts. And it's also about just kind of like stopping them in their tracks and be like, okay, where's the evidence? Like our brain likes evidence, it likes logic, and it likes facts. So kind of breaking that down and seeing whenever you get these, you know, these automatic negative thoughts, is seeing, you know, what's separate facts from, you know, false assumptions, because assumptions are just that, right? But then also, you know, sometimes we have realistic assumptions, and then sometimes we have like inflexible and harmful assumptions. So that's something, you know, like identifying those. So I always have people identify like what their assumptions about their body is. Like sometimes people will say things like, you know, I have to cover up when I'm wearing a bathing suit. I don't want to like gross everyone out for my body. Or if I don't look perfect for this meeting, nobody's going to pay attention to me, or I'm not going to be accepted. Or like, you know, in our adolescent years, we feel pressure to dress a certain way or look a certain way. So one of the first steps is kind of identifying what those assumptions are, and then like writing them down and debunking all these things, right? And I always tell people to write things down. That's one reason why I do love journaling, even if it's just like a few times a week, because when you write things down, and we can kind of think about how this really is. Like back in the day when we were in school, like we would have to like handwrite everything, like notes or whatever it was, or even through like handwriting a grocery list or something. But when you actually do pen to paper and you write things down, it works with your subconscious mind, and it just kind of like makes like a sort of law in your subconscious mind, like tells you that you mean business. Because ideally, and that's the thing in sports psychology too, is like we want to just operate from our subconscious mind, and we want to, you know, be motivated, we want to be confident, we want to be able to perform really well with whatever our performance is, you know, whether we are just staying at home with our kids, or we're in the boardroom, or we're an athlete, or whatever. So that's kind of why I always have people actually write things down and take notes. But the first thing is like I said, identifying those assumptions and kind of bringing them to the surface, or self-awareness, because self-awareness is the cornerstone for change for everything. If we're not self-aware and we cannot objectively look at ourselves, we won't be able to change, right?
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. So you have to say like, where in my life did I get this assumption from, right? And that's where you're understanding, okay, why do I need to be this size to be accepted? And kind of go back. Because like you just mentioned, like when we were little, we don't compare ourselves until people teach us to compare ourselves. I always use the example of, and I just talked to my husband about this yesterday, like I didn't know I was poor when I was growing up until somebody told me I was poor, because my world was just my world. And I had no idea, you know, until I had no idea that people slept on beds. I thought we all slept on the floor, you know, and so you just don't know. So where did those come from? Like, where did they start? For sure. And to sum that up, because I know we had to make this quick, and this was our first IG live, and I kind of wanted to get to the point for Kelsey, and then Ashley. Ashley's questions was to.
I ramble a lot.
That's good. I wanted to get you talking because I know that you get a lot on your mind, and sometimes it takes that to kind of get us talking on topic. Is to identify where it's from, change our thought patterns, and I think I did that. Like I did a podcast on this where I hated everything about myself after I was competing. I was depressed and all that. And I just was like, I'm not going to say those things out loud anymore. And I'm only going to look at one thing that I love. And I would say, and people laughed. It was a good year.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Would not mention and give any thoughts, any energy, and I would not speak them out loud. So I just said only one good thing, if that's the only thing I could look at. And so that's kind of changing that thought process too. And it did. And when I'll say something negative about myself, it almost like hurts my own feelings now, you know? And so
as it should, right.
And that reframe. And then you said
reframing.
And I guess we didn't really realize we were doing that. And that's why you're so passionate. And that's what I kind of want people to understand too, is why you're doing what you do. Because what we have experienced in our life kind of makes us passionate about, you know, moving forward and pain to purpose and all that stuff. But I think it's really cool what you're doing for people, and what you've done for, even, like I said, even some of my personal clients and friends and just kind of sparking their spark again to feel good about themselves and to get them inspired again within themselves. And that's what you've done with them, to get them inspired within themselves to feel awesome enough to continue their workouts. And that's where I come in, as a workout, right? But sometimes you just can't get there because you just don't know how to get past that negative thought process. But then you said to write down your values. And I think people can take that home. is to pen and paper, get it out, solidify it, and journal, and to write down your values and maybe focus on that versus outward appearance if you can't do anything else.
Right. And also another big step too, after you identify your assumptions is your triggers, right? So like, what are some of your triggers? Like, are they, like comparison, like there's a whole thing called the social comparison theory. I mean, sometimes like we're triggered if we feel rejected, like by a breakup or something like that, or negative comments. Maybe that's why it's important. Like we watch what we say to people, and even ourselves. Yes. But, so always kind of identifying what those triggers are. Again, like, it's like you really have to dig deep for a lot of this stuff and bring it to the surface, break it down, figure out where, facts and logics are versus assumptions, and just kind of fix it from there. But like I said, there is a process to it. And it takes, we spend years and years not feeling great about ourselves or feeling self-conscious or worrying about what other people think. So it takes time to kind of rewire and reframe, your brain essentially. So,
yeah. So focus on some good positive things and know that it.
Yeah. With time. Yeah, for sure.
And to identify all of that. Well, is there anything else you want to share with people in general? Because I know like that's kind of the driving force, the passion behind what you're doing is to build confidence in people. Because I think that you went down a road that wasn't very confident. You're like, this is no place to be. And then you have 3 girls to boost their confidence and to work with. And I love that about you, that you went on to further your education, finishing a master's, right?
No, I did that like in 2005.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And then, but what are you finishing now for this next role that you're doing? So,
Well, like I'm finishing up a few classes, like so I can sit to be. I've always been certified as like a wellness consultant, but not board certified. So I've had to retake a few things so I could sit and be board certified. And then working as a mental performance consultant, through the Applied Association of Sports Psychology. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So any last tips for anybody that's maybe, your general like feel good tip and all that? Oh, I wanted to add real quick. This is something you're also passionate about because you ride this very thin line and you're like, oh, sometimes I hate it, is social media. And we have a lot of control for social media. So, we can unfollow people and we can kind of block people out. And I think that's something that you always talk about because I think every other day or every other week, you're like, man, I just can't stand social media sometimes. Because it's good, but it's bad because I think that's where we can get in that comparison loop. I do sometimes.
Yes, girl. I mean, everybody does. That's why it's so, and I tell this all the time to people, it is so important what we feed our brain, right? Like confidence is not linear. Like we have to continually feed our brain positive stuff, whether it's from reading a great self-help book or listening to a great podcast or doing our like 5-minute devotionals or whatever, because stuff happens throughout the day that's going to knock our self-confidence down. So social media being one of them. Like I said, in psychology, there's this whole thing called social comparison theory, and it's very real. That's like the number one confidence boost or confidence destroyers for everybody, is comparing ourselves to other people, and social media is a breeding ground for that, right?
I was on Instagram yesterday I was so grouchy. I was messaging you like, I don't want to work out. I feel like poop today. And,
and I was like, no, you're not, you're jacked.
And I was like, scrolling, and then I saw somebody's like before and after, and it's a very diet culture page, and I probably shouldn't even follow it. But I kind of respect some of the people that are on it, so I stay on. But I'm like, man, it was like red flag. I'm like, I'm trying to follow this page because the before picture looked like me. So I was like, wait a minute. Like it looks like I do now, and I don't feel bad about myself. I think I look great. I feel great.
Yeah.
That weak moment, I was like, wait a minute. Should I feel bad because I look like this before picture, and the after picture is much skinnier and much leaner? So in that moment, I had a flashback of comparison, and from rewiring my brain, I didn't know what I was doing, but that's what you essentially help people with. I was like, no, that's not correct. But I did feel bad for a minute.
Well, and another thing that is positive about social media is I read a study where it talks about like, again, that's one thing about social media. We can control who we follow and we can control who we don't follow. Mm-hmm. So anyway, there's a study that was saying that if you follow people on social media that aren't just like extremely fit, but they're people with curves and they're, larger than like the fittest, people that we see a lot of times for our fitness inspiration, that actually helps us accept ourselves more. Like there's science that shows that. So just being mindful about who you are allowing your energy to go to, right? Like I always say, like there's like quote energy vampires, and like some people just suck it out of us, right? And I think we all know what that means. So again, just like energies, we have a certain amount of waking hours during the day, right? So just being mindful of who we choose to give that energy to, I think is so important. And we talk about this all the time. Like we become who we hang around with, right? Making sure that you have a very positive support network.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of body image, one thing that I always have people do, like kind of like for quote, homework or whatever, I always ask them to make a list of 10 things that they appreciate about their body that has nothing to do with the appearance of it. And then when you do that and you actually write things down, it just makes you see things differently. Again, like
all the groceries in at once, or being able to pick up my child, or something like that, right?
Able to squat pain-free,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever it is. That kind of really helps people a lot. And also just like self-compassion. Every single one of us lacks self-compassion. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
Like we all do. And so there's another exercise that's called like writing a letter to a friend. So I always have them think about this. Okay, you're telling me your situation right now. If that happened to your best friend, what would you say to them? And then it just completely changed perspective, right? So it's all about a shift in perspective and reframing our thoughts.
Yeah. And like talk to yourself like you would your child, or
Friend or something. Yeah. Oh, your child. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. All right, Terri. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
To save this again, this is both of our first Instagram live.
I thought we were going to be on the computer.
Oh, you did. I'm sorry. I know, like that's why I like tried to tell you that we were doing Instagram live, but
I know you didn't read it. That's my fault. So
they asked me to save it and then post it, or whatever. So if you guys have any questions or anything like that, for Terri, you can obviously comment below here, or you can go follow her and message her, and all that stuff. And I just love what you are doing, mission, and personally done. Of course, I loved what you're doing before, but you have personally helped people that I know care about. Thank you, Ashley. She gave us a great first live. She said we and I have just kind of seen just the spark in people that you've helped that that I don't have the tools to help with, because I'm just here to work out. And obviously I can
just send people to you to work out, because that's not what I want to do.
But I've given them confidence, and helped them with ways to work through that. So amazing. And I love you.
I love you.
All right. Well, again, go follow her. If you have any questions, just post below this video, and hopefully this can save. All right. Bye.